Now, Politico reporting that President Obama derailed a campaign against Hezbollah to secure an Iran deal. Senior investigative reporter Josh Meyer broke that story. He joins us right now. Josh, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
There is this concern that it was all rushed very, very quickly, and others have made great political hay of this, saying, you know, Democrats are very quick to criticize Republicans for rushing a tax cut package through, yet they were rushing a life and death matter through. I don't know where the truth begins and the fiction starts, but there does seem to be some evidence here that to get this done, they had to make some compromises, and a big one with Hezbollah. Could you explain?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the Obama administration was the first to admit, you know, that this was a very long-term process, that, you know, that there were a lot of moving parts to the negotiations. I think what I was trying to focus on is sort of some hidden aspects of the deal. Again, not saying that the deal itself was good or bad, and that's not what the Drug Enforcement Administration agents were saying. What they were saying is that that their efforts to investigate, prosecute, and throw into prison senior members of this Hezbollah-led drug trafficking organization was also very important and shouldn't have been sort of thrown under the bus. And they believe that that happened. I investigated it. I talked to dozens of people. And it seems like that appears to have been the case, whether it was intentional or not by Obama administration officials or sort of a byproduct of them having this myopic focus on the Iran deal. When you look at all of the key suspects that they identified as far back as 2008 who are still on the loose, you know, it seems like the proof is in the pudding.
Was it their fear that if Hezbollah wasn't on board with this, then they wouldn't have the deal?
Well, you know, it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Right.
I think, you know, I talked to people at the State Department, CIA, Justice Department, FBI, DEA, of course, White House, National Security Council. And what they said is that, you know, that there was a sort of an atmosphere there where the Obama administration didn't want anything that might interfere with that. They wanted to show good faith to the Iranians, and therefore certainly high-profile arrests, extraditions, investigations, things like that would be seen as a rebuke to that. So I think that there was a lot of behind-the-scenes discussions about that, but there was no announcement saying don't do any law enforcement efforts. I think that the people involved say that it was much more sort of behind the scenes than that.
Was there anything that was reciprocal in that sense, that then the Iranians, I'm switching groups now, had to adhere to things that would not embarrass or compromise this agreement? Because they did a lot of things, I remember, going after ships in the Strait of Hormuz, elsewhere, that at the very least complicated the whole thing.
You know, I didn't focus on that. I've heard that there were, you know, in some instances, things that they might have done where they throttled back on cyber attacks and so forth.
Right.
But I think one of the concerns among the federal investigators, and I had done an earlier story in April about how the Obama administration derailed counter-proliferation efforts as well. The concern was that that Iran was continuing this bad behavior even as the deal was being negotiated, that they had Iranian and Hezbollah, which is essentially a proxy of Iran, trafficking networks in the United States and elsewhere, that they were proceeding apace with their plans to do that, to evade sanctions. They were expanding and so forth. So I think that their consensus is that that Iran was not as negotiating in nearly as good faith as the Obama administration was trying to do.
Yeah, I like the way you didn't judge the deal one way or the other, just what was done to get to that point. But very good reporting, very good story. Josh Meyer, thank you very, very much.